you had to write letters,
Yeah.
right? And where your letters were taken and moved was by transportation back then, which was via ship.
Yeah.
So if you were moving your correspondence very far. You recall the times when we had to send letters across things in Nigeria when the post office was functional, and you had post office boxes, and your parents would probably go to a post office box to retrieve letters that they received. And if the letters came in from overseas, that was like super huge. It was super exciting. You just didn't know what was going to come. But then again,
even when I was in school, I had to write letters, and I would probably come back from meeting and my letter hasn't arrived.
Yeah, you got home. That was, people lived like that, and they survived.
I can't even imagine.
Right. But jumping right back into this excerpt that we're taking again, I feel that one of the things that really jumped at me and, took my attention was the way Pa Elton got his calling to come to Nigeria. I went over I had heard the stories before actually reading this book. And about how they prophesied, and in a meeting, in one of those, the apostolic meetings, there's prophets got up and prophesied that John will go to Africa. One said he was going to go to Africa, and the other one was more specific and said he was going to go to Nigeria and Elisha and all of that. And I read the documentation of that, and I mean, I had to wonder, like, would that have been enough to convince, say, you to leave your family in this place? Let me paint a scenario and put some context, right? That's like you live where you are, your life in Lagos and everything that you know, things are working out good, you just joined this new church and things are going great, and but somehow you have a conviction that God is calling you to do more. And then you are hearing that you need to go to maybe one country, like in a remote part of either India or maybe a country in Africa, say Burundi, where you're not really sure. You've never even heard, you don't even know what's going on in that place first. You do understand that it exists, but you don't really know what's going on in that particular place. It's such a long way off. And for now, we really would not grasp the full extent of it, because you always have the internet that can tell you anything about everything. But back then, they didn't have that advantage. And he had to move, right? And he, according to reports, he had to leave. His calling was confirmed from two meetings that held separately, and two prophetic ministers of the apostolic faith back then was supposed to go to, one said to Africa, and the Spirit impressed it upon another prophet's heart that man was supposed to go to Africa and all of that. Now they communicated that, willing to yield to the Spirit. He was supposed to go on this missionary journey. Also, his wife, who had always known from when she was a child that she probably would be going on missionary journeys, because she grew up in a missionary family, but she read the story of Mary Slessor and her trip to Calabar, and her mother bought her a doll as an 8-year-old girl, and they named the doll Calabar, right, in Nigeria, right? And you read that, and you see and you begin to understand how God is so intentional about our lives. And I don't know what you think about all of this.
It's really, really amazing and humbling, because how God uses the simplest things. I mean, Christianity or it just shows how deep or how sincere people are with their calling. Because I remember even in the book, I don't think Pa Elton was how many years old in faith?
Yeah, right. He was probably just a few years in faith.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that he got saved in the year 1930. Either 1930 is when he got saved. So, let me just check that out. I think that he got saved in 1930.
Just to confirm it.
Just to confirm that. Okay. And the earliest experts, yes. Let me see. Just for this. Okay, they got married in 1930.
Yeah, yes, that's true.
Right, he got saved in the year 1928. And I believe that
The
these
prophecy, yeah.
prophecies came in the year 1932.
So
That was just probably about 4
4
years
years
in the faith.
in the faith.
Mm.
And for you to believe God, you heard or you are convicted about an instruction.
Okay, yes, this prophecy came in 1936.
Okay, so the prophecy 936. Okay, so that's quite about.
So he had, sorry to cut you short, he had an encounter where the Lord told him that his hands was going to be upon him, but it was not specific.
Okay.
So that was his first encounter with
Yeah.
God, and God reiterated it, and he said that in that encounter he had the Lord speak to him about, repeated it a couple of times, where he says he has laid his hands upon me, and he said, my hand is upon you, and if I say this many times, I will have you to know when I repeat my word, it is for those to take notice of what I declare. Upon my servant my hand is upon him, and I will do many things. I will give him a ministry unto others, the ministry of the Lord. And I believe that happened in 1932.
Okay.
But that was God introduction,
Yes,
pretty much,
telling him about what he's going to do,
What he
or
was
will
going
have
to
him
do.
do,
Yes.
in the future. But the crux of what I'm saying is that no matter how long we are in faith, we trust God, we accept God, accept Jesus as our Lord, and then we trust him every instruction that he gives. That's very, very deep for me.
When you say we trust God like that, when I read this, I'm going to tell you the truth, right? Let me paint the scenario again. So I looked at this. This is a guy living in Shrewsbury, somewhere, maybe around somewhere in the England, that British places. And back then, no phones, no internet to check out where you're going to, no details to follow up. You don't have instant messaging.
Yeah.
So you have no clue what is going to happen. Now,